This meeting is private. Bearing false witness, misrepresentation, posting inflammatory rhetoric in public forums is forbidden and shall be addressed in an appropriate manner. To eliminate all conflict and false allegations, is there anyone in attendance at today's meeting that is a member or agent of any law enforcement agency of a federal, state, county, city, township, agency present? This is also for notary, poll workers, school board members, anybody who has signed an oath to the de facto government. Please raise your hand, say your name, and state your position. Number 2, this meeting is private. Bearing false witness, misrepresentation, and posting inflammatory rhetoric in public forums is forbidden and shall be addressed in an appropriate manner. To eliminate all conflict and false allegations, is there anyone in attendance at today's meeting that is a member or agent of any law enforcement agency of a federal, state, county, city, or township agency present? This is also for notary, poll workers, school board members, anyone who has signed an oath to the de facto government. Please raise your hand, say your name, and state your position. Looks like we're all clear. One last time. This meeting is private. Bearing false witness, misrepresentation, and posting inflammatory rhetoric in public forums is forbidden and shall be addressed in appropriate manner. To eliminate all conflict and false allegations, is there anyone in attendance at today's meeting that is a member or agent of any law enforcement agency of a federal, state, county, city, township agency present? This is also for notary, poll workers, school board members, anyone who has signed an oath to the de facto government. Please raise your hand, state your name, and say your name, and state your position. Awesome, we're all clear. Well, take it away, Glenn.
Okay, well, I don't remember if we talked about this, but I filed a notice of constitutional challenge into my case, and so I was looking in the comments and on this Telegram channel and we have some people here from Canada that are complaining about the frustration with the system in Canada. I got to tell you, Canada is especially bad. Because you don't have the constitutional protections that you do here in America because of our Constitution, and so it's really bad. The courts are just kangaroo courts, and you have to take it, you have to appeal it, and it's really bad in Canada, I got to tell you, and I don't. That's why I'm here, because there's no way that I would go to Canada right now. Anyways, communist Canada, it's really bad. I feel so.
I was saying to Bobby that what you're stating is all a fact, but until they put algorithms in place of all these humans, because nobody wants these jobs that, everybody's becoming aware of what's going on and they're becoming too confrontational. So they're putting robots in place to, they'll switch your phone off and you don't get it put back on unless you're answering to a robot with a credit card for the overpayment that they want you to make to put it back on. And that includes your heating too in the winter. So they are more than communists. At least gave you food until they shot you dead, right? Well, here they're starving you and freezing you out, and then they're sending your mail back. Don't get me going, Glenn.
Yeah, I understand completely. I wish there was there's actually Trump has talked about Canada becoming part of the United States, and of course the communists up there don't want that to happen because then you'll have constitutional protections. So I don't know how all that's going to play out. I guess we'll see. Rumors, okay, this is rumors, is that First of all, we all know that Trump was invited to run. Okay, so we have to go back into history a little bit. At least since World War II, and there's a lot of evidence even before that there's been a communist insurrection going on in America, and the communists have been trying to overthrow the government. And there's been 4 attempts, counterinsurgencies. Okay, so there's been a communist insurgency has been happening. There's been 4 attempts. The first one was Kennedy, and they killed him. The second one was Nixon, and they blackballed him. And the third one was Reagan. And so the first 3 failed, and but this one so far is succeeding. And so you're going to see a lot of stuff happen this year, big time. You look at General Flynn videos, and I would suggest you look at General Flynn videos, because he is part of the, I believe he was part of the insurgency or counterinsurgency. They say that there's 200 generals. So you got to understand that the military doesn't have jurisdiction inside the United States. There's a ex parte Milligan. There's actually quite a few Supreme Court cases that talk about that, but one of them in particular was ex parte Milligan. This was during the Civil War. Milligan was a guy that was bad-mouthing Lincoln, and they didn't like it. So the military, this was in Ohio, okay? He was in Ohio. Ohio was not one of the rebel states, and the military arrested him and held a trial and sentenced him to death by hanging. And all he was doing was bad-mouthing Lincoln. And so he went and hand-wrote a habeas corpus to the Supreme Court, and they issued this case ex parte Milligan. Ex parte means without the party. and I think that's why, I think that Lincoln, that pissed Lincoln off, and he sent troops to the Supreme Court, and to this day, in Rule 45 of the Supreme Court rules, it says all mandates from the Supreme Court come under authority of the President of the United States. So there's really no separation of powers. But so the bottom line is, though, the Supreme Court issued that ruling, and so Lincoln was kind of screwed when that happened. Anyway, so there's been a counterinsurgency. The military doesn't have jurisdiction inside the United States unless we've been attacked by a foreign power. Okay? If you read the Lieber Code, it says that martial law is the immediate and direct effect of military occupation or conquest. That's article. Let's pull that up. Let's pull that up. Yeah, let's pull that up. We'll pull up the Lieber Code and look at that. The Lieber Code was the law of war for the U.S. Army. Francis Lieber, who was a law professor for Harvard University, was asked by Lincoln to write it. And so that was the law of war for the U.S. Army. Now, none of that has ever been repealed.
Yeah, that's what you started me off with, and reading that gave me hope.
Yeah. There we go. I'll pull that up, and then I'm going to share it so people can see it.
I know paragraph 1 and paragraph 3 are vitally important.
Well, there's a bunch of stuff, actually, that's important that people don't realize. So this is a Word file, and let me share it. Everybody needs to be familiar with this. This has never been repealed or modified. It's only been added to. If you go to, there's a law of war manual now, and I've got it.
Yeah, you gave it to me. Can you can confirm though that that's not part of any statutes or any codes, correct?
Well, it's actually a regulation. It's a law for the Army. Okay, so there's no statutes or anything like that. This was written by Francis Lieber as General Orders number 100, 24th of April, 1863. I don't know if you can see that at all. And it tells you where you can pull it up online. Avalon Law. Francis
Lieber. We're
Lieber.
not seeing your screen. You're not sharing. If that's your intent.
No, I gotta share it on Telegram. You're right. I'll let you have that one. I'm sharing it on YouTube. I'll let you have that one. I appreciate you letting me know. Okay, now you guys can see it. So right there, it says that the Lieber code. Oh, let me just go online and make sure that I'm doing the live stream, because I might not have turned on the live stream. I haven't. I started streaming on the there we go. So it's going now. We're talking about the Lieber code for YouTube. I'm going to start over a little bit. We got to go back into history. So President Trump was asked to run. He was invited by the military to run. Now, you have to understand the military doesn't have jurisdiction inside the United States. But when we get attacked by a foreign power, then they do have jurisdiction. And that goes to the Lieber code. And so we're talking about the Lieber code today. This is where we're going to start. So this is Francis Lieber, who was a Harvard Law School professor. It was originally issued as General Orders number 100. And you can get it from the U.S. Government Printing Office. So these are the articles. So we'll just get into the Article 1. A place, district, or country occupied by an enemy stands in the consequence of the occupation under the martial law, the invading or occupying army, whether a proclamation declaring martial law or any public warning to the inhabitants has been issued or not. Martial law is the immediate and direct effect and consequence of occupation or conquest. And so the presence of a hostile army proclaims its martial law. Okay, so there's been an insurgency, okay? And so the military has to engage the enemy. That's their job. And so that's what a counterinsurgency is when the military engages the enemy. And so Article 2, martial law does not cease during a hostile occupation except by special proclamation ordered by the Commander-in-Chief or by special mention in the Treaty of Peace concluding the war when the occupation of a place or territory continues beyond the conclusion of peace as one of the conditions of the same. So the bottom line, though, is that there's been no special proclamations, and with the Civil War, there was no Treaty of Peace. All there was a ceasefire. And so there was no Treaty of Peace. So the martial law continues to this day. That's why the police wear military uniforms. They have military rank structures because we're under martial law. And martial law in a hostile country consists under the suspension by the occupying military authority of the criminal and civil law and the domestic administration and government of the occupied place or territory, and in the substitution of military rule and force for the same, as well as in the dictation of general laws. Dictation meaning dictatorship. As far as military necessity requires this suspension, substitution, or dictation. Now, they don't want you to know that you're under martial law, okay? And that's because of the cause and necessities for taking up arms, 1775. The colonists figured out that was going on, and that's why they took up arms, and they said they started hunting down the British tyrants and blowing their fucking brains out. And so the commander of the forces may proclaim that the administration of all civil and penal law shall continue, either wholly or in part, as in times of peace, unless otherwise ordered by the military authority. And that's true. And so they want everything to just be nice and smooth. So you got to understand that that's they don't want you. They don't want the whole, especially in a place like America where everybody's armed. Okay, they don't want a civil war. When they invited Trump to run. So let's go back to what's happened then. So recent events. So we talked about at the beginning, and this is for YouTube now. We talked about at the beginning how Trump was invited to run by, they say, 200 generals. I think it started out that way, and I think maybe there's a lot more now. Anyways, and Trump's job, in my opinion, was to jerk their chain and get them to expose themselves. And so what happened is they needed to set it up. They needed him to win the election. First of all, they knew there was election rigging, but the election rigging could only go so far. And so if people came out in force against or for a certain candidate, then they could only rig it so much. And you saw what happened in 2020. You know, they shut down the voting offices for a couple hours, and so they could fabricate some ballots, and they did all sorts of stuff. So the first time they weren't expecting what was coming, and so Trump won the election, and then the second time Trump actually, I think they set him up to steal the election. And they wanted it to be really flagrant so everybody would see it. Okay? Again, they don't want a civil war. And I'll explain why as we get into this. So they don't want a civil war. So I don't know how many of you remember the 2020 election. I remember there was a bunch of stuff that came out in the news. For example, it came out in the news that those Dominion voting machines were transmitting their data to an Italian satellite that was owned by an Italian defense contractor and leased to the Vatican. And what happened is it came out in the news, and there was a big shakeup in the Italian government. I think Berlusconi was the prime minister, and he resigned. And they have a lady now that's there that's kind of like Trump. And so now you have to remember, see, the military, I mean, these guys are brilliant. This is their trade, their stock and trade about warfare. And they have a law of war. Not a lot of war, but it's a war college. Okay, it's in Leavenworth, Kansas, and where the military officers go there and learn about warfare. And so they study this stuff. Anyways, so what happened is Trump, about halfway through his term, he'd issued an executive order about foreign interference in our election, right? Well, if these Dominion voting machines are transmitting their data to an Italian satellite, that's foreign interference in our election. And it said that he could seize property and do all sorts of stuff. Now, so what happened is what I heard. Okay, this is a rumor. Okay, I have no evidence of this at all, but I've heard it from a couple of different sources, and I think that it probably did happen, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But the rumor is that we had seized anywhere, but there was a couple different rumors. There was 250 airplane loads of gold from the Vatican, and there was another one that talked about 650 airplane loads of gold. Now, I've worked on aviation all my life, okay, and so I could tell you that like a C5 could probably carry, without any trouble, probably about 100 tons of gold, okay, and so that's 200,000 pounds. 100 tons? Yeah, that's 200,000 pounds. That's about right. A fully loaded 747 takes off and it weighs over 1 million pounds. And so a C5 could carry about 100 tons. So you're talking 650 airplane loads, or 250. Okay, 250. I mean, that's a hell of a pile of gold. And now that was all nice. I heard rumors about that, but then somebody sent me a link to a website in Italy where the Italian police said that they saw U.S. troops in the Vatican around that time. Now that's a corroborating evidence, so I think that might have happened, okay? If there was U.S. troops around that time in the Vatican, then why else would they be there? Think about it. So I've heard that there's 3 military bases that are bulging at the seam with gold. You know, that's rumors. Okay, this is just rumors, but it's I believe that it's probably true because of that corroborating website where the Italian police said that they had seen U.S. troops in the Vatican around that time. So anyways, so that's the first thing. Then some other stuff that came out is, I don't know if you remember, this was on the news. Sidney Powell went home at night expecting to prepare Insurrection Act paperwork for Trump to sign the next day. And when she came back, this was on the news. I remember this. Mark Meadows, who was the chief of staff at the White House, had revoked her White House pass. And everybody was calling Mark Meadows a traitor. And I remember that. But what I've heard since then, okay, and this makes a lot of sense. But again, this is a rumor. Okay, it's actually 107. I heard that from, and 107 is a very interesting guy, I got to tell you. He knows people. You know, he's always traveling somewhere. You see him doing videos, and he's off the coast of Antarctica. Another time he's in Alaska. Another time he's at Mar-a-Lago, and he hobnobs with General Flynn and Mike Lindell and all these people, and so, you know, he's got some contacts. One of his videos, he said that he was on a yacht with a general when the Oklahoma City bombing happened. That's in 1996. I remember that because I was in Oklahoma City when that happened. And it was like I was working swing shift, and it was like the building shook. And it's like a truck hit the building. And so I remember that. But so anyways, and he was on a yacht with a general. So, and he was probably in his 20s, you know. I don't know how old he is, but I would say, you know, I mean, he was in the 90s. Well, I was in my 30s in the 90s. No, I was in the 40s. 30s, 40s, around there. Anyways, so the point is that he knows stuff, I'll tell you. Anyways, he said that when Trump met with generals all the time in the middle of the night, okay? Remember, why Trump was invited. Let's go back to that. There's a YouTube video with Jerome Corsi. I've got this in my book. There's a YouTube video with Jerome Corsi. Jerome Corsi is a guy that's got a PhD in political science from Harvard. He's got a website. He's got a YouTube channel. Written a bunch of books. Anyways, there's a YouTube video with Jerome Corsi where he says that in 2015, 5 generals came to see him, and they said they were going to overthrow Obama. And he said, well, you can do that if you want, but you might want to go talk to Donald Trump first. 3 months later, he gets a phone call. They decided not to overthrow Obama because Donald Trump had agreed to run for president. So there's the invitation, and that's according to Jerome Corsi, and I think that's a very credible source. That's first-hand knowledge for him. That's not rumors for him. Okay. Anyways, so what happened is that 107 said that Trump used to meet with generals all the time in the middle of the night. So think about it. They're giving him instructions on what to do. And on this night, this was, I think it was just before January 20th, because he was getting ready to sign the Insurrection Act. Anyways, the generals told him that he certainly could sign the Insurrection Act, but that if he did, that they believed within 6 months we'd be in a civil war, and they had gamed out all sorts of civil war scenarios, and that the Republic does not survive. And so he decided not to sign the Insurrection Act. So that explains why Mark Meadows had revoked Sidney Powell's White House pass, and why he didn't sign the Insurrection Act. So his job was to jerk their chain, and he's really good at that. You think about that. He's really good at that. And so what happened is, after Biden took office, I got an email that said, Trump's going to get indicted, but don't worry, it's all part of the show. And then it was about 18 months before the first indictment. And so then Trump got us just before his first indictment. I've got this in some of my YouTube videos. Trump put out a meme, and he said, if you've been wronged by the deep state, I am your retribution. I'm going to go after the deep state when I get back into power. So think about it. What's he doing? He's jerking their chain. He wants them to expose themselves. So that's what they did, is they started indicting him with all sorts of crap, all sorts of lawfare, and a bunch of indictments. And before his most recent indictment, he actually started coming out and talking about public hangings. That was before his assassination attempt. So think about it, he's really good at jerking their chain, and he just loves doing that stuff. Anyways, so his job, and he was talking to these generals, okay, from time to time. That they were telling him what he needed to do, and so that his job was to jerk the chain of the deep state and get them to expose themselves. And then think of, I don't know how much you remember. There was Admiral Rogers when Trump won the first election. He got a skiff. Okay, a skiff is a secure compartmentalized intelligence facility. It's supposed to be completely secure. Nobody can record or know what you're doing and all that stuff, right? And this is I think one of the generals. I don't know, but I think this is one of the generals. So what happened is Admiral Rogers, who was in charge of the NSA at the time, he went and did his meetings and stuff like that. And he called his car. He had a chauffeur. Called his car and told him to pick him up. And he put some stuff in his briefcase. And they said, take him to the Trump Tower, and where Donald Trump was. And they took him there, and he went and knocked on the door and said, I'd like to see Donald Trump, please. And they said, who are you? And he said, I'm Admiral Rogers, in charge of the NSA. And so then a few minutes later, they said, yes, sir, come on in. And he went up to see Donald Trump, and he opened up his briefcase, and he showed him pictures and recordings of what was going on in a secured compartmentalized skiff. And he said this stuff was being circulated amongst Obama and everybody else in D.C. And so Trump immediately went to a different facility. Okay, so there's some good generals for sure. I mean, they they have to be careful what they do, because if they get exposed, then they won't get like General Flynn. He was in charge of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and so they get to these positions, and then they find out, then the deep state finds out that this guy's a patriot, and they get blackballed like General Flynn did. So anyways, so what happened is that was when Trump first won the election. So now we're going back to the indictments. So he was indicted a bunch of times, and now he's won the election. But his job, okay, again, I guarantee you, he's meeting with these generals, and they're telling him what he needs to do. So that, because they do not want a civil war. If there's a civil war, the republic doesn't survive, and it will be massive loss of human life. Okay? And so they don't want, remember that Deagle.com, okay, showed that the population of the United States at the end of 2025 was 100 million people. That means they were planning on killing off about, 250 million people. And so that would certainly open us up to invasion by China, all sorts of stuff. And so their plan isn't working too well. And Trump has been able to sabotage it. Now, people talk about the COVID-19 and how he went and he didn't actually encourage people to take that damn jab. He did do the what do they call it, fast track. Well, the reason is they had been planning that for decades. Okay, they've been planning the COVID-19 and all of that for decades, and so he had to sabotage it. And so what he did is we're going to do a fast track. We're going to force you guys, because they were planning on having us locked down for like 10 years. And well, they supposedly investigated, did trials on their jab. You see what I'm saying? And what he did is he forced them to bring it out before they were ready. And but he didn't. He said, I remember him saying, he says, anybody that wants to take the vaccination is going to be able to. But he remember, he got sick, and he got a jab, but it was the hydroxychloroquine jab. And that was the real cure. Anyways, so we were attacked by the communist Chinese in 2020. They've been stealing our elections. Actually, and then there's Patrick Byrne. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Patrick Byrne. You need to watch. It's called The Enemy Within. I would highly recommend you watch the Patrick Byrne. It's a Rumble video. You have to pay for it, but it's not expensive. It's only like about $5. I paid for it. It's well worth it. You can watch it and see what's going on Patrick Byrne's part of the story, because that is very enlightening too. Okay, and he's completely unrelated to any of this other stuff. So Patrick Byrne used to be the CEO of Overstock.com. So anyways, we're back to the Libra Code. So Article 4, martial law is simply military authority exercised in accordance with the law and usages of war. Military oppression is not martial law. It is the abuse of the power which that law confers. As martial law is executed by military force, it is incumbent upon those who administer it to be strictly guided by the principles of justice, honor, and humanity, virtues adorning a soldier even more than other men, for the very reason that he possesses the power of his arms against the unarmed. So anyways, I would suggest you get familiar with the Libra Code, because that stuff's still going on, and it's now called the Law of War Manual, and it's about 1,000 pages, and all they've done is add to it. Okay, and there's treaties that we've gotten into since then. There's the Geneva treaties, the Geneva Conventions of Geneva. There's of 1949, and then there's also the Hague Conventions. There's a bunch of conventions and that govern behavior during war. And so you can accuse them of war crimes. So I would suggest you get familiar with the Libra Code. I think we've covered that for now. Let me see here. So let's go back to, I'm going to go through this brief about the unconstitutionality of the some things. So I did a notice of constitutional challenge into my case. And so this is a brief that I attached to it. The Court of Appeals finally sent me their letter, because whenever you do an appeal, they send you a letter and say the filing fee, you have to pay the filing fee, you have to, they tell you to do some things so that, and then what they'll do eventually is send you a scheduling order. And so they finally sent me that letter, and so now I have to prepare my response here this weekend. So this is a brief in support of the Notice of Constitutional Challenge pursuant to your Color of Law Rule 5. Comes now demandants providing notice to the bought and paid for clerks masquerading as judges in this inferior legislative court and their executive branch congressional handlers in the District of Columbia that their 1871 corporation at 16 Stat Port 19, domiciled in the District of Columbia, and its minor estate scam are violations of the organic laws as follows. So there's 4 organic laws for the United States of America. We've been covering this in other YouTube videos. And so I would recommend you, because we've only gone through the Declaration of Independence and we started going through the Articles of Confederation. And so there's 4 organic laws. And if you go to the Office of Law Revision Council, which is a U.S. House of Representatives website, they talk about this. Okay, and this is important because this is the real law. Okay. The Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, 1781, the Northwest Ordinance, 1787, and this Constitution for the United States of America, 1787. The Northwest Ordinance was published by Congress, or enacted by Congress, 3 months prior to the Constitution. So, and the reason they did the Northwest Ordinance is because in the Definitive Treaty of Peace of 1783, the King of England granted Congress huge tract of land. It's basically the United States had all the territory south of the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River, to the west to the Mississippi River, and then south of that to the Ohio River Valley. So all that territory, so there's like about 5 states in that area right now, and that wasn't part of any of the original colonies. And so they had to do a Northwest Ordinance, which defines federal jurisdiction in federal territory, and that's really important because Texas, for example, because Texas is under a military occupation, we're federal territory, and so it defines the nature of federal jurisdiction. Even though it's called a state, it's not a state. As it's actually comparable to the original 13 states, but because of the Civil War, it's questionable as to whether they still have military occupation here. They have it in Arizona. They actually have it because of the martial law that was imposed during the Civil War, and that martial law was imposed everywhere. So the District of Columbia 1871 Municipal Corporation is a violation of the organic laws because it's Roman law from the Vatican. Civil law, Roman civil law are convertible phrases meaning the same system of jurisprudence, that rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, more properly called municipal law, to distinguish it from the law of nature and from international law. So, again, That's why these kangaroo courts, or they're all kangaroo courts, they're everywhere, because they're Roman law, which violates Article 1 of the Amendment, which requires Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. And so they're bringing this Roman law from the Vatican on the land of America. And is bringing the Vatican's Roman law onto the land of America, which uses fraud, deception to supersede and replace common law. And this is, there's no common law offenses against the United States, only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its command or crimes. And under Texas law, no act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute. The legislature may create an offense and in the same enactment provide exceptions to its application. As found in the Causes and Necessities for Taking Up Arms, 1775. Statutes have been passed extending the courts of admiralty and vice admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the courts of common law and instead thereof to publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial. So that's important. So it supersedes and replaces common law. That's why they don't, they'll sit there, their codes say, the common law applies, insofar as inconsistent with, they put all this lawyer language in there. And it's also talked about some of the reasons for the separation from the tyrant in the organic law of the Declaration of Independence, 1776. He's confined with others who subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution, unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. That's talking directly about the minor estate. For imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. He's abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. And that's what every court case is, warfare. Okay, you got to understand that. That's Roman law. That's what Roman law is all about. It's warfare. Because common law is
collateral attack. Oh, sorry, Glenn. I like a collateral attack because they cut off your commerce.
Well, it's not my commerce. I mean, I can make a contract with somebody without entering into commerce. Okay, commerce is very specific definition. You have to enter into international law to do commerce. Okay, so you're kind of confused there, and you have to be careful how you use your words because they use it against you. Remember, what do they tell you? Anything you say can or will be used against you in a court of law. So you have to be careful about what you say. Because common law is the law of the land, which has always been here. And this is Hale versus Hinkle. His rights are such as existed by the law of the land long antecedent to the organization of the state and can only be taken from him by due process of law and in accordance with the Constitution. And it is full of fraud and deception, which is the same reason why we took up arms against the Vatican's tyrant for all the grievances listed in the organic law of the Declaration of Independence, 1776. The minor estate at 31 Stat 363.6, that the county of Montague and their Vatican's bar members and their Vatican's bought and paid for clerks masquerading as judges have assaulted the demandant with, is also a violation of the organic laws under Article 1 in Amendment, which requires Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. The minor estate was created by the Vatican. And this is Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, Volume 2, under the definition of mortmain. Yet still it is found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. That's the Roman cult, folks. For when they were driven out of all their former holes, they devised a new method of conveyance, by which lands were granted not to themselves directly, but to nominal fiefs, to the use of the religious houses, use being usufruct, thus distinguishing between the possession and the use, and receiving the actual profits, while the season of the land remained in the nominal fief, which was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy. That's the Roman cult, folks. Isn't that convenient, eh? The clergy gets to decide whether it's wrong or right. To be bound in conscience to account to the sestique use for the rents and emoluments of the estate. That's taxes, folks. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. And by the Vatican's tyrant with the Sestakay V Act of 1666, at Chapter 11, 1819, which was for land titles, which was brought into America with the Code of Law for the District of Columbia at 31 Stat 1432, where it says, the legal estate to be in the Sestakay use, which is talking about land titles. And a use is short for usufruct under Roman law. These things which perish by capitis diminutio, or which kind are a usufruct, an obligation of services on the part of a freeman contracted by oaths, and matters enforceable by a statutable action. And this is taken from the commentaries of Gaius, the Rules of Ulpian, translated with notes, 1874. Which is a type of a trust, and a U.S. citizen minor estate entity is a taxpayer. Every taxpayer is a Sestakay trust having sufficient interest in preventing abuse of the trust to be recognized in the field of this court's prerogative jurisdiction. A citizen of the United States is a civilly dead entity operating as co-trustee and co-beneficiary of the public charitable trust. The constructive Sestakay Trust of U.S. Inc. under the 14th Amendment, which upholds the debt of the USA and U.S. Inc., and that's taken from Congressional Record, June 13th, 1967, pages 156-41 to 156-46. Okay, so that's a summary of 5 pages of a Congressional Record. So it's not, you won't find it in there, but if you read those 5 pages, it's essentially saying that. The Vatican's minor estate is also talked about as some of the reasons for the separation from the Vatican's tyrant in the organic law of the Declaration of Independence. And this is, again, the Declaration of Independence. He's combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution, unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government. He's abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us, and is found in the causes and necessities for taking up arms, 1775. Statutes have been passed extending the courts of admiralty and vice admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law and instead thereof to publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial. Janet Yellen and her predecessors used the Vatican's fraud and deception of their minor estate entity, GlennWinningham Fern. Now I say that the heir, as long as he's a child, differeth nothing from a servant, though he be lord of it all. And that's Galatians 4:1. To use it as justification to assault and demand it with the Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, in violation of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. To deceptively assault and demand it with a quasi-contract. And this is assumpsit in its origin, an action of tort. Assumpsit was soon transformed into an action of contract, becoming afterwards a remedy where there is neither tort nor contract, based at first only upon an express promise. It was afterwards supported upon an implied promise and even upon a fictitious promise. Introduced as a special manifestation of the action on the case, it soon acquired the dignity of a distinct form of action which superseded debt. Now notice these words, these are commercial words that they're using. Which superseded debt, became concurrent with account, with case upon a bailment, a warranty, and bills of exchange, competed with equity in the case of essentially equitable quasi-contracts, going out of the principle of unjust enrichment. Surely it would be hard to find a better illustration of the flexibility and power of self-development of common law. Yeah, see, there's a lot of different types of common law. Anyways, both in Roman and English law, there were certain obligations which were not in truth contractual, but which the law treats as if they were. They were contractual in law, but not in fact, being the subject matter of a fictitious extension of the sphere of contract to cover obligations which do not in reality fall within it. Which requires the Vatican's minor estate slash 31 CFR 363.6, U.S. citizen or other fiction. Constructive quasi-contracts are based solely upon the legal fiction or fiction of law. So the Vatican's bar members in the county of Montague can assault or demand it with their Texas tax code with their forced rendition, which is why the Vatican's fraud and deception of capitis diminutio. Capitis diminutio is the destruction or the kaput of legal personality. Capitis diminutio, so to speak, wipes out the former individual, puts a new one in its place. Between the old and the new law, there is, legally speaking, nothing in common. Juristic personality may be thus destroyed in one of three ways: by loss of status libertatis, this is capitis diminutio maxima; by loss of status civitatis, which is the capitis diminutio media; and by severance from the agnatic family, this entails capitis diminutio minima. And this is a textbook on the history and system of Roman law, Roman private law, and that's Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. Capitis diminutio maxima, meaning the maximum loss of status through the use of capitalization. That's all block capital letters. The highest and most comprehensive loss of status. This occurred when a man's condition was changed from one of freedom to one of bondage, when he became a slave. It swept away all the rights of citizenship and all family rights. That's Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. Because the Vatican's fraud and deception of capitis diminutio maxima is used when they enslave people, and they are Satanists using fraud and deception to sell people into slavery as collateral for their minor estate. He, the prisoner, has as a consequence of his crime not only forfeited his liberty, but all his personal rights except those of the law, those which the law and its humanity affords him. He is for the time being a slave of the state. Which are non-judicial proceedings, because whenever a statute's involved, the Vatican's fake judge is actually a bought and paid for clerk masquerading as a judge. When acting to enforce a statute and its subsequent amendments to the present date, the judge of municipal court is acting as an administrative officer and not in a judicial capacity. Courts administering and enforcing statutes do not act judicially, but merely ministerially, but merely act as an extension, as an agent for the involved agency, but only in a ministerial and not a discretionary capacity. It's the accepted rule not only in the state courts but in the federal courts as well, that when a judge is enforcing administrative law, they're described as mere extensions of the administrative agency for superior reviewing purposes, as a ministerial court for the agency. Judges become involved in enforcement of mere statutes, civil or criminal in nature, and otherwise act as mere clerks of the involved agency. I'm going to step aside. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I'm back. Let me just check YouTube and see if they're getting anything. Yep, there's some comments there, but I'm not quite sure what they're talking about. Anyways, so this is my constitutional challenge. It's in the Court of Appeals now, and I'm prepared to take it to the Supreme Court. I've actually been thinking about doing a Rule 11 motion like the Brunson brothers did, but I haven't yet. I still might. So we'll see. But the remote viewers saw Congress adjourning for the last time, and I'm wondering if that 1871 corporation's ruled unconstitutional, then that would certainly cause them to have to adjourn. And then that would create all sorts of interesting things. So the reason I mention all of that is, and I'm going to finish reading this thing in a second, but the reason I mention all of that is because remote viewers have seen Congress adjourning for the last time, and then what I'm hearing is going to happen. There's going to be a huge amount of chaos over this year. Guantanamo Bay, I don't know how much you know about Guantanamo Bay, but Guantanamo Bay has been expanded by a lot. And they've got housing for 250,000 jail guards in Guantanamo Bay now, from what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing. And so there's the military is involved. We were attacked by a foreign enemy, by China, and by the Venezuelans. If you listen to Patrick Byrne, he says that Venezuela, they actually brag about having stolen the elections in 70 countries around the world. So we got to take our country back, first of all, and then we got to help these other countries deal with their issues as far as the stolen elections are concerned. So, we'll see how it all plays out. But what I'm hearing is that there's going to be arrests. Matter of fact, if you listen to General Flynn, he's saying he's waiting for Comey to get arrested. So we'll see. I don't know if Comey's going to be the first. He doesn't know if he's going to be the first or not. But he thinks that there's going to be some arrests, some very public arrests, and everybody's going to see it. And what they're saying is that they've got the budget for the rest of the fiscal year, the money appropriated. So then Congress is going to have money appropriated until the end of September. Now, if I go to the Court of Appeals, I could easily have my answer by then, although it might take longer, or maybe I'll do a Rule 11 motion to expedite it. Anyways, this is the issues that I'm bringing up. So what I've heard is that when the budget, the fiscal year ends, they will start shutting down departments of the government, and then Congress will adjourn for the last time, although I don't think there's anything about that yet, but that they will start shutting down departments of the government because the money will run out. And what I'm also hearing is that there's going to be Cliff Highs saying he did a recent Substack where he talks about how it's going to come out that the bankers were creating a lot more money than what was authorized by the Congress, and that because what happens is Congress borrows Federal Reserve notes into circulation, but the bankers have actually been creating a lot more than that, a huge amount more, and so there's it's all fiction. It's all a fiction, but there's a bunch of it that's illegitimate, and they still, what they do is they tax, or they yeah, they tax the American people for it, the government, and even the stuff that's not created by Congress. And so this is it's Clip High saying that's going to come out in May, and it's going to create a lot of chaos. Admiral, retired Admiral Jim Rickards is saying that the price of gold is going to go to 26,000 this year. I think that that's probably conservative. Jim Rickards he's retired admiral, so he doesn't really come out and say things like that unless he really has reason to believe that it will happen. And he was the chief counsel at Long-Term Capital Management, and that was the first bailout that happened in the 90s, late 90s. There was the first bailout. And Jim Rickards talks about that. He's got YouTube videos where he talks about that. He's a very, very smart guy, I'll tell you, very interesting. And so he says that there's going to be 2 crashes on the 11th of April, which is Passover, 20% each, which will be put the stock market down to about 24,000. And if you know anything about what happened in the 30s, the stock on Black Tuesday, the stock market crashed. There's no doubt about it. But then it continued to crash for about 6 months before it finally bottomed. And so I guess we'll see how it all plays out. They have to destroy these riggers, the people that are rigging the metals, and I think that's part of what they're planning on doing. We'll see. This is a lot of this is educated guess. I have this is stuff I'm talking about now is just stuff I'm hearing from other people. But what you need to do is I would be buying silver. I wouldn't buy gold. It's too expensive. Silver is going to go up way more than gold. And so I'd be buying silver and I'd be buying cryptos. I don't keep any more money in the bank than I absolutely have to. And that's me. Okay, it's up to you. I'm not telling you what to do. This is certainly not financial advice. That's me. That's what I'm doing. And I would be very careful about any money if it was me, I'd be getting anything I have in the bank. I keep less than $100 in the bank. Let me put it that way. I either have it as cash or I put it into cryptos. I buy silver. Shit is going to hit the fan this year. Okay, it is hitting the fan this year, and so we'll see how it all plays out. We're a captive audience. So, anyways, let's continue on with this constitutional challenge. Was somebody going to say something?
No, I was going to agree that things already have hit the fan because they're putting all these algorithms in place where there used to be a human that had to answer or try to transfer you off to a different department if you had a question regarding something. Now they put all the algorithms in place so that you can't even speak with a human. So that's happening here. I just hope that doesn't, hit your area because that enrages people when they do stuff like that. You don't get a live human being here. You get a robot.
I know I hate it when I get the robot, but I don't think that's going to change. Matter of fact, it's actually going to be beneficial for us. They've actually had Vance speaking about that, is that the artificial intelligence basically takes jobs away from people that are doing, simple jobs. But then they can do something that's more complicated and probably get paid more money. It makes their labor worth more, actually, if you think about it. So I guess we'll see how it all plays out. We're a captive audience. I think there's going to be huge changes, and there's a lot of jobs. What Clip High is saying, that these counties, he said that there's a real estate crash in progress, and I can agree with that 100%. Especially commercial buildings right now. There was Jim Willie talked about a commercial building in St. Louis that previously sold for $400 million, a 40-story office building, and it recently sold for $1.5 million. And so that's a huge drop. And Clip High said that because of property taxes and because of the costs of taking care of maintaining the building, that these banks will seize these buildings and they won't be able to sell them for any price because of the cost to maintain the building and the property taxes. And so they just won't be able to sell them. The banks will have to go bankrupt. And so for any price, won't be able to sell them for any price. And so it's that's going to start that's Clip High said that's going to go on for 20 years. He said that in 20 years from now, the most valuable real estate will be urban farms, where people set up urban farms and grow organic food and they don't have to truck it anywhere because you're in the middle of the city, and so there's all sorts of people around that want to buy the fresh food that's organic. You see what I'm saying? And so if it was out in the country somewhere, then they'd have to pick it green and truck it into the city before it spoils. And if it's in the city, then they don't have to do that. And there's a lot of that makes a lot of sense to me, I'll tell you. But that's going to be like, it's going to take a long time for it to get all sorted out. But that would be, what I'd really like to do that. I'll tell you, I love gardening. So anyways, have some hot houses and you could just do all sorts of things. Anyways, so let's go on with this brief in support of the Notice of Constitutional Challenge, which is why it's called a Bill of Pains and Penalties, similar to a Bill of Attainder, in violation of the organic laws of this Constitution for the United States of America, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1, and Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3. Bill of Attainder means a legislative act, no matter what their form, that apply to either named individuals or easily ascertainable members of a group in such a way as to inflict punishment on them without a judicial trial. Well, let's think about it. That's what happens. You're not having a judicial trial. It's an administrator, okay? And it can be against you personally. It's the legislative act because he's an administrator. And so a Bill of Attainder is a special legislative act prescribing punishment without a trial for a specific person or group. Bills of Attainder are prohibited by the U.S. Constitution. And I can tell you in Canada, I would be bringing that up, okay? But it's going to be, if you go to the CanLII and do a search for attainder, the Supreme Court of Canada has ruled they're unconstitutional. And so that's the argument, okay? Any traffic offense, that's an attainder. It's a Bill of Attainder and a Bill of Pains and Penalties.
It's treason, false oaths. You want to get me going, or?
Well, it's easier to argue this, but it certainly is. I mean, but it's the administrative hearing, okay? So it's a bought and paid for clerk masquerading as a judge. It's a Bill of Attainder, Bill of Pains and Penalties. A Bill of Pains and Penalties is a legislative act, though similar to a Bill of Attainder, prescribes punishment less severe than capital punishment. A Bill of Pains and Penalties, included in the U.S. Constitution, bans on bills of attainder. Also means they have no authority to do anything judicial and are fraudulently and deceptively presenting themselves as a court of law. Ministerial officers are incompetent to receive grants of judicial power from the legislature. Their acts in attempting to exercise such powers are necessarily nullities. Their legislative inferior court might be a superior court of general jurisdiction under certain circumstances. The court of general jurisdiction is presumed to be acting within its jurisdiction until the contrary is shown. But when a superior court of general jurisdiction undertakes anything that's in derogation of common law, it becomes quad hoc an inferior court of limited jurisdiction. To be the statutes which would deprive the citizen of the rights of person or property without a regular trial according to the course of usage of common law would not be the law of the land. And their maritime codes have absolutely nothing to do with common law. When, therefore, a court of general jurisdiction proceeds under a special statute, it becomes a court of limited jurisdiction for the purpose of such proceeding. And that's Book 21 of Corpus Juris Secundum, Courts, Section 2. Accordingly, where a court of general jurisdiction undertakes to carry out a special power, a decision made and exercises such power as treating as a ruling of a court of limited jurisdiction, and the presumption applicable to a court of general jurisdiction that it acted within the scope of its jurisdiction does not apply. It is familiar law that when special statutory authority and derogation of common law is conferred on courts of general jurisdiction, such a court of general jurisdiction becomes quad hoc a court of inferior or limited jurisdiction. Therefore, it is actually an administrative hearing for their maritime code. Ministerial act is an act that a public officer is required to perform in a prescribed manner in obedience to the mandate of legal authority without regard to his own judgment or opinion concerning such acts' propriety or impropriety when a given state of facts exists. Discretion, on the other hand, is the power conferred on public functionaries to act officially according to dictates of their own judgment. When acting to enforce a statute and subsequent amendments to the present date, the judge of municipal court is acting as an administrative officer and not in a judicial capacity. Courts administrating and enforcing statutes do not act judicially, but merely ministerially, but merely act as an extension as an agent for the involved agency, but only in a ministerial and not a discretionary capacity. It's the accepted rule, not only in the state courts, but of the federal courts as well, that when a judge is enforcing administrative law, they're described as mere extensions of the administrative agency for superior reviewing purposes as a ministerial clerk for the agency. Judges who become involved in enforcement of mere statutes, civil or criminal in nature and otherwise, act as mere clerks of the involved agency, which is a fraud and deceptive because the actual and executive agency working for the executive branch. The word administrative or as synonymous with the word executive. The word administrative connotes of or pertains to administration, especially management, by managing or conducting and superintending the execution and application of conduct of persons or things. Administrative acts are those acts which are necessary to be done to carry out legislative policies and purposes already declared by the legislative body. In fact, it is common to use the two words in tandem, which is full of fraud and deception because there's no judge for that proceeding, but is actually a bought and paid for clerk masquerading as a judge that cannot do anything judicial. Ministerial officers are incompetent and receive grants of judicial power from the legislature. Their acts in attempting to exercise such powers are necessarily nullities. Where there's no jurisdiction, there's no judge. The proceeding is as nothing. Such has been the law from the days of Marshal Saya. And that's a federal court case citing a U.S. Supreme Court case, Bradley versus Fisher, which is citing 10 Coke 68, which is Coke in the 1500s. To put the demanded into bondage, selling the demanded into slavery is collateral for the Vatican's minor estate as described in 31 CFR 363.6, because an entity includes the estate of a living person, such as an incompetent or a minor. Entity means any owner of a Treasury direct account that's not an individual. Entity is a sole proprietorship, limited liability company, professional limited liability company, trust, the estate of a decedent, or the estate of a living person, such as an incompetent or a minor. And a minor can be an individual who's attained the age of 18 years but has not yet taken control of the securities in his or her minor account. Minor means an individual under the age of 18 years. The term minor is also used to refer to an individual who has attained the age of 18 years but has not yet taken control of securities contained in his or her minor account. They are fraudulently and decepting using the Vatican's minor estate, 31 CFR 363.6, to bring the District of Columbia outside a maximum of 10 miles square in violation of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square, as may by cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of government of the United States, which is using the Vatican's fraud and deception to unlawfully place a demand under the Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia, and through their plenary power nationally covers those citizens even when one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states of the Union. And that's National Mutual Insurance Company versus the District of Columbia versus Tidewater Transfer Company, U.S. Supreme Court, 1948. This is why the Vatican's bar member are name-calling the demandant a sovereign citizen like it's a bad thing when they know the House Joint Resolution 183, dated May 3rd, 1940, 54 Stat 178, says in the preamble, whereas it's desirable that the sovereign citizens of our nation be prepared for the responsibilities and impressed with the significance of their status in our self-governing republic. And the Vatican's bar members are required to know that the Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that everyone and everything not privileged is sovereign. The rights of sovereign to extend to all persons and things not privileged that are within the territory. All of which evidences their intent to perjure their oath to the supreme law of the land, Article 6, Clause 2, to make war on the Republic and engage in all the reasons for separation from the Vatican's tyrant listed in the organic law of the Declaration of Independence. This is prohibiting the free exercise of the demandant's religious beliefs in violation of Article 1 and Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. As a Christian, because the demandant has a right to own land under natural laws found in the Holy Bible. Every citizen or freeman is endowed with certain rights and privileges to enjoy which no written law or statutes required. These are fundamental or natural rights recognized among all free people. Which is satanic, because the Vatican is a necromancer with their minor estate and is bringing dead things to life and prohibited under God's laws found in the Holy Bible. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of time, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord, and because these abominations the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. And that's Deuteronomy 18:10-12. Verse 10 to 12. And they're using fraud and deception in the Vatican's minor estate to engage in the theft of the demandant's land and populate the prisons by selling people into slavery. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die. Thou shalt put evil away from among you. And all fraud and deception and lies come from the devil and Satan. You are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. John 8:44, I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews or Christians, and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. And so that's the end of this. And I could add in some stuff, although I've already filed it, but if I would add in some stuff about plenary, about this plenary right here. It talks about, where is it? Right here. Through their plenary power nationally covers those citizens, even one of the several states. Plenary means it's a dictatorship. So, anyways, this video has been going on for over an hour. Is there anything else that we want to talk about? So what's going to happen is the chaos is going to be really bad. They're saying that the 10th of April, I mean, that's like 2 weeks away now, 2-3 weeks at the most, that there's going to be crash. I guess we'll see. This is rumors at this point. But you need to be prepared. It's going to get really ugly, but there's also going to be major opportunities. Even I'm hearing Warren Buffett is selling all of his real estate. And so there's other people that see it coming. I'm telling you. So I would, I don't know. It's you got to decide how you're going to do. Everybody's got to decide for themselves. But sometimes, the important thing is just get out of the way. You can't fight everything. So the best thing to do is dive for cover and get out of the way.
So since this is a constitutional challenge, where is it being filed?
Well, I filed it with the district court, and it's going to go to the Court of Appeals. That'll be the Fifth Circuit, U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. And I'm preparing my response right now, today, and I'll have it in the mail on Monday. And so that's going to happen. And so then I'll have to, it usually takes a while for this Court of Appeals, so it'll take months. It won't happen quick. I guess we'll see how it all plays out. But so at any rate, and then after that it's the Supreme Court. I've been to the Supreme Court 5 times, so I know what to do. This will be number 6.
So you gave me some good news that Montana Little Bay has been expanded so that Trudy can fit in there with all of his group.
Guantanamo Bay, that who in his group?
Trudeau. There'll be room for him there.
I don't know how that's all going to play out. I guess we'll see. They're U.S. prisoners that are there. Guantanamo Bay, I don't know if you know where Guantanamo Bay, it's on the far side of Cuba.
It's Cuba. It's in a very desert-like area where nobody else wants to go, even though it's the Caribbean.
Yeah, I didn't know it was that bad, but I know that it was an area that was leased by the U.S. government a long time ago, and it's interesting. That tells me that if you understand that, the Civil War was started because the South fired on Fort Sumter. Okay, Fort Sumter was a U.S. military base in South Carolina. And so the South fired on it. It's alleged that the South fired on it. I think it was probably a false flag operation. But the bottom line is that I think that the South was just anchoring to go to war. They figured they'd win, and they found out different. And so it goes to show that if you don't go, and you can have these enclaves basically in your territory, and if you don't, if you're peaceful about it, then it can go on for years, because we've been in Cuba for a long time. That's been there for a long time, and the Cubans leave us alone, and we leave them alone. So, anyways, I don't know if anybody remembers that movie with Tom Cruise. It was about Guantanamo Bay. Men of Honor, I think it was called. It was pretty interesting, where they got that general to admit that he committed a felony, and it was a colonel. Actually, it was a colonel, a Marine colonel, and yep, it was pretty interesting, the politics that goes on with that stuff, So the military courts have their own way of doing things.
Yes, they do, and they're very secretive about it, aren't they?
I'm not sure how secretive they are. I think they're public. I think you can go on, if you know about a military court, but they don't tell you. Well, they have their rules, and the military, it's all for the military. But when you're engaged in warfare, then you open yourself up to the military, and so these people, I think that there's going to be people that are going to be exposed to be engaged in treason and in warfare, and that's all going to come out, and
It's unlawful to have U.S. military operating on U.S. soil in a military capacity.
it is unless there's warfare. That's where it becomes legal. When we're attacked by a foreign enemy, then all of a sudden everything changes.
What about if that foreign enemy is within? Isn't that what you've been talking about the whole time, Glenn?
What's that?
Isn't that what you've been talking about the whole time?
About what?
The Vatican?
Exactly.
Foreign agents operating on United States soil?
Yeah, that's true. But it's more than that. It has to be warfare, and so a theft of an election is an act of war.
I don't disagree, but it was put in place by those given. Oh, yeah.
What's that? So we were attacked by the communist Chinese with a biological warfare agent. I think that was probably the first thing that they could prove that was foreign interference with our elections. They had to be able to prove it, and they were able to prove it, and so that's what. So the election theft and the foreign interference, that's why Trump issued that executive order, and that's why the military is stepping in, because there's foreign interference in our elections, and so they're going to be arresting a lot of government officials and for giving aid and comfort to the enemy. Okay, so a county official that helps with the election theft is giving aid and comfort to the enemy. That's the definition of treason in the Constitution. And so that's going to be a problem. There's people going to be charged with treason, and they're going to be taken to Guantanamo Bay, and they're going to get some free room board for a very long time. So, and there's probably some people that are going to get put to death. I don't know how that's all going to play. I'm glad it's not up to me, because I certainly wouldn't want to be a part of a decision like that. I don't wish that on anybody. As much as they're evil, I'm glad that's up to somebody else. But so anyways, do we have anything else we want to talk about here today?
What about that guy from Germany that wanted to reenact Nuremberg 2?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I haven't heard about that. Reenact Nuremberg 2. I know what Nuremberg 1 is.
They were calling it Nuremberg 2.2.
Well, that's talking about war crimes. Nuremberg is talking about forced medical experiments and that kind of stuff. And so they certainly need to, put stop to that stuff. I think all of that stuff's going to come out. And I think that this is all in the process. And the military has their way of letting it come out. Again, they don't want a civil war. They don't want huge numbers of people getting killed. They're trying to make it as peaceful as possible. And I think it's, they're brilliant in my opinion. They know exactly what they're doing, and I'm glad that I thank God every day for our military and the honorable people that are in it, and so um, you know, absolutely. I can't say enough for them. I certainly appreciate everything they're doing, and as a matter of fact, when my cryptos come in, if I become a billionaire, one of the first things I want to do is go and buy General Flynn a new house, and make sure that he's got a real nice house. Because he got his house, he lost his house when they did their lawfare on him, and so I want to make sure that he's got it taken care of. There's a bunch of people that I want to do things for when I get to be. I have a bunch of veritasium. I don't know if you know about veritasium. Veritasium is they're talking about it's going to be used to veritize everything. When the economy completely crashes, Cliff High said he saw in his data sets the U.S. government going hat in hand to Reggie Middleton. Reggie Middleton is the guy that he patented it. He has a patent, so they have to go to him because he's got the patent. They can't go to anyone else because that would be a patent violation. That would be encouraging lawlessness. So they have to go to Reggie Middleton. And so when that happens, he's been attacked by the Securities and Exchange Commission, and he created this veritasium, and they're going to veritize everything. So there won't be these brokerage firms on Wall Street. They'll be gone. There will be no brokerage firms. It'll all be done with veritasium, and they'll use smart contracts. They'll veritize everything. I've got like about 250 veritasium. Cliff High said that that'll be worth more than Bitcoin. And they're saying Bitcoin's going to be over $1 million. So that means that I'll have, who knows? Maybe a bill. I don't know. But so just from those 250 veritasium that I got, and and then also I got some other stuff that I'm doing. But so anyways, we'll see how it all plays out. And then my silver, I've got a bunch of silver. So right now I'm pretty humble, but and I'm not gonna change any way when I get to be, if I get to be a billionaire, I'm just gonna be me. Excuse me. So, but there's a bunch of people that I'd like to help out and encourage them in doing what they're doing, like Tom Fitton. With his judicial watch, I'd like to give him a bunch of money and so that he can continue doing what he's doing. I think he's a really good guy and deserves some support. There's a bunch of people that I'd like to support, and General Flynn is one of them. I think that he is a true patriot. Quite frankly, Trump himself, I'd like to give him. I've been out of work since 2015, so I gotta be careful with my money. But I've been wanting to help out. Trump is a billionaire. There's no doubt about it. But he shouldn't have to put the bill for saving this country. We the people need to help him out with that. And he shouldn't have to put the bill. He should come out of it. I mean, he's doing a wonderful thing for everybody. And so, I'd like to, even though he's got loads of money, I'd like to do something for him too, and his family for all of the stuff they're being exposed to and everything. He certainly deserves, our eternal gratitude, and so I'd certainly like to do it for him and his family. And so, there's a bunch of people that I'd like to do things for. And if I become a billionaire, my kids won't even talk to me. So I kind of like to give it away so I don't give them too much.
I was going to say you better be giving their kids a house before you give Glenn a house.
Yeah, my kids are, actually there's friends of mine in Canada that I'd like to help out and do things for. But my kids, they don't even want to talk to me. And so, that's the first thing I'm going to say is, oh, all of a sudden you want to talk to me now that I'm a billionaire? I'm going to try and give as much away so they don't get too much. But they'll probably get something, they're not going to go away penniless, that's for sure. So we'll see, but I'm going to try and give a bunch of it away. Because I don't think they deserve too much. Actually, don't get me going. You're going to get me going.
Don't get me going, Glenn. I've been writing a will for 2 years that makes provisions so that my children will maybe get in line after I'm dead,
Yeah, it's pretty sad. But yeah, so I'd certainly I don't want too much to go to my kids. There's a bunch of people I'd like to do things for, that's for sure.
Yeah, I agree. That's my biggest advocate of benefits is for people that help out the animals and stuff. So that's where I'm headed.
Yeah, help out, the people that's what Trump even says, when you're down, that's when you find out who your friends are, who they really are, who your friends really are. And he said that he wanted to find out who was really his friends. And he said that when he was like a young guy. And so he's finding out. And so he's getting what he wants, and he's a brilliant guy, and he's really good at doing what he does. And so I just love what he's doing. Absolutely.
Well, I know everybody said that he was kind of a shit after the Trump University thing, but I sued a university not once but twice, and at least he gave people back their money. I had to sue to get mine back.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right. Well, I guess that's about it for tonight. I think we'll cash it in. Thanks everybody for watching. It's a networking thing.
Really shitty on this end. You're buffering really bad on my end. And I don't have any bad funny jokes to tell you tonight either. So I just gotta sign off. But I hope you'll come back and talk next week with us.
I will. And I had a real nice time in Arizona. I was in Phoenix, and I just love Arizona. I know I'm going to end up there anyways. And I love
it. There?
Huh?
Is it warm? Were you wearing shorts?
Well, it wasn't that warm. It was still pretty cool. There's been a lot of wind and stuff. And it was like in the 60s and 70s in Arizona. So it wasn't, but it's been like that here too. And so it was comparable to here, actually. Usually it's in the 80s and 90s, especially this time of year, but it was actually kind of cool. But,
well, hey, if you ever miss the ocean and, like, want to see it rain cats and dogs, like, for days on end, you're welcome here anytime.
Yeah, I like Vancouver. Vancouver's nice. But it's communist Canada, and I try and stay away from communist Canada right now until there's some regime change. I'm staying away from communist Canada. But yeah, you're right. Vancouver was one of my favorite areas in Canada. Just because it was 60 below in Alberta, and you go to Vancouver and it's raining, and I used to think, man, I'll take the rain any day. It runs off all by itself.
Yeah, it's nice in the summer for sure, with the ocean and everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the agriculture. Okay, thank you, Glenn. Have a great evening, and thank you for coming.
All right.
Hear from you.
Thanks for everything, and same time, same place next week. Same time, same place, same channel next week.
Perfect, I'll be waiting.
All right.
Here, Glenn.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Send me the video.
Absolutely.
All right. See ya.